Part 1. Lucy Thompson sat quietly in the corner of Oakwood Community Library, her fingers gently turning the pages of her science book. The 12-year-old girl with dark curly hair loved spending her Saturday afternoons here, surrounded by books that told amazing stories of discovery and invention. Today, she wore her favorite blue t-shirt with a picture of a rocket on it and had her hair pulled back neatly. The library was Lucy's safe place. At school, some children made fun of her because she loved science so much. But here, between these walls filled with books, she could dream as big as she wanted. Mrs. Baker, the kind librarian with silver-rimmed glasses, always smiled when Lucy arrived and often saved new science books just for her. Lucy finished reading about famous women scientists and checked her watch. She had 2 hours before Dad would pick her up. Perfect. Just enough time to research for her science project about renewable energy. Her teacher, Mr. Wilson, had said her idea was excellent, and Lucy wanted to make sure her project was the best it could be. She gathered her notebooks and walked over to the computer area. 5 computers sat empty, their screens dark. Lucy chose the one in the corner, turned it on, and typed in her library card number to log in. She felt someone watching her but thought nothing of it as she began searching for information. Elizabeth Winters had been coming to Oakwood Library for 20 years. With her blonde hair always perfectly styled and her expensive handbag always on her arm, she considered herself the unofficial guardian of the neighborhood. She noticed Lucy typing quickly at the computer and frowned. Elizabeth didn't recognize this child, and something about her made Elizabeth uncomfortable. These computers aren't for just anyone to use, Elizabeth thought to herself. They're paid for by our community taxes. Elizabeth watched Lucy for 5 more minutes, growing more suspicious as the girl switched between websites and took notes. Finally, she couldn't stand it anymore. She stood up, smoothed her designer skirt, and walked over to where Lucy sat. "Excuse me?" Elizabeth said sharply, her voice much louder than the usual library whisper. Several people looked up from their books. Lucy jumped slightly, startled by the sudden voice. "Yes, ma'am," she answered politely, just as her parents had taught her. "These computers are for library members only," Elizabeth said, looking down at Lucy with cold eyes. Lucy blinked in confusion. "I am a member," she replied quietly. She reached into her backpack for her library card to show the woman. Elizabeth gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "Sure you are. Which one did you steal that from?" Lucy's mouth dropped open in shock. "I didn't steal anything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She could feel her heart beating faster and her cheeks growing hot. "I've been watching." "You?" Elizabeth continued, her voice getting louder. "Sneaking around using resources meant for real community members. I'm calling security right now." Tears began to fill Lucy's eyes. She had never been accused of stealing before. Some other library visitors were staring now, and Lucy felt smaller with each passing second. Elizabeth pulled out her phone and began dialing. "Yes, I need to report a problem at Oakwood Library," she said into the phone. "There's a girl here causing trouble and accessing computers without permission." Lucy's hands trembled as she took out her own phone. With tears blurring her vision, she typed a message to her father. "Dad, someone called the police on me at the library. I didn't do anything wrong. Please come." She pressed send, then looked up to see Mrs. Baker hurrying toward them, concern written all over her kind face. Outside in the distance, Lucy could hear the faint sound of police sirens growing louder. Part 2. Elizabeth Winters paced back and forth near the library entrance, one hand holding her phone tightly to her ear while the other pointed at Lucy. Her heels clicked loudly on the wooden floor as she walked, breaking the usual quiet of the library space. "Yes, there's an unaccompanied minor causing a disturbance at Oakwood Library," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "She's using our computers without proper authorization and refused to leave when I confronted her. I think she might be trying to access things she shouldn't." Lucy sat frozen in her chair, her science notebook open but forgotten on her lap. Hot tears rolled down her cheeks as she noticed other library visitors turning to stare at her. Some looked confused, others curious, and a few seemed to be judging her without knowing what had happened. This can't be happening, Lucy thought to herself. She had never been in trouble before. Her parents had always taught her to be respectful and follow rules. Now everyone was looking at her like she had done something terribly wrong. Mrs. Baker, the librarian who had known Lucy since she was 5 years old, hurried over with concern in her eyes. Her usually neat gray bun was slightly messy, showing she had moved quickly when she heard the commotion. "What's going on here?" she asked, looking between Lucy and Elizabeth. Lucy tried to speak, but her voice came out as a whisper. "This woman says I stole my library card and called the police on me." Mrs. Baker's kind face showed surprise, then understanding. She turned to Elizabeth with a firm expression. "I think there's been a misunderstanding here. Lucy is one of our regular visitors. She comes here almost every weekend." Elizabeth shook her head firmly, her blonde hair barely moving thanks to the strong hairspray she used. "I've already called the authorities. They can sort this out. Better safe than sorry when it comes to protecting community resources." "But," Mrs. Baker started to protest. "No buts," Elizabeth interrupted. "If she's done nothing wrong, then she has nothing to worry about, does she?" Lucy's phone buzzed in her hand. She looked down to see a message from her father. "On my way. Stay calm. Everything will be okay." Those simple words made Lucy feel a little braver. Her dad always knew what to do. He would fix this. She took a deep breath and wiped away her tears with the back of her hand. Outside, police sirens grew louder. Through the large library windows, Lucy could see blue and red lights flashing. Her stomach felt tight with worry. She had never spoken to a police officer before, except for her dad, of course. Mrs. Baker sat down next to Lucy and put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry, dear. We'll sort this out." Elizabeth stood by the door, arms crossed over her chest, watching as a police car pulled into the parking lot. Her face showed that she felt very pleased with herself. "The police will be here any second," she announced to everyone and no one in particular. "Then we'll get to the bottom of this." Lucy watched through the window as 2 officers stepped out of the car. One was tall with broad shoulders, walking with confidence toward the library entrance. The second officer followed close behind. Even from a distance, Lucy recognized her father's walk. A small smile crossed her face despite her tears. The library door opened. Elizabeth stepped forward, ready to explain the situation to the officers. "Officer, thank you for coming so quickly. I'm the one who called about Lucy." The tall officer's deep voice cut through Elizabeth's words as his eyes found his daughter. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Part 3. Elizabeth's mouth fell open in surprise as Lucy jumped up from her chair and ran to the tall police officer. The officer knelt down, his strong arms wrapping around Lucy in a warm hug. "Dad, I was just using the computer for my science project, and this lady said I stole my library card," Lucy explained through her tears, pointing at Elizabeth. "She called the police on me." "Dad?" Elizabeth repeated, her voice suddenly much quieter than before. The color drained from her face as she realized what was happening. The officer stood up slowly, keeping a protective arm around his daughter's shoulders. He was an impressive figure in his crisp blue uniform with shiny badges. His kind eyes, so much like Lucy's, now turned serious as he looked at Elizabeth. "I'm Police Chief William Thompson," he said, his voice calm but firm. "And yes, this is my daughter Lucy." The second officer, a shorter man with a friendly face, stepped forward. "Chief, would you like me to handle this situation instead?" Chief Thompson shook his head. "No, thank you, Officer Parker, I've got this." Elizabeth's legs felt weak as she realized her mistake. The confidence she had felt just moments ago disappeared completely. She looked around the library and noticed everyone was watching. Some people were whispering to each other. Mrs. Baker stood nearby with her arms crossed, giving Elizabeth a look that made her feel 2 inches tall. I didn't know," Elizabeth stammered. "I was just trying to protect the community resources," Chief Thompson finished for her. "Yes, I heard that part on my way in." Lucy wiped away the last of her tears, feeling much braver now that her dad was here. She had always been proud that her father was the police chief, He was fair and kind to everyone, and people respected him. But she had never seen him quite like this, standing tall in his uniform, his voice so calm, yet so powerful. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private," Chief Thompson suggested, looking at the growing crowd of curious onlookers. "Mrs. Baker, is the conference room available?" The librarian nodded quickly. "Of course, Chief. Thompson, right this way." Elizabeth followed them down the hall, her designer heels no longer clicking with confidence. Her hands shook slightly as she clutched her expensive handbag. This was not how she had expected her Saturday afternoon to go. The small conference room had a round table with 6 chairs. Chief Thompson gestured for Elizabeth to sit down. Lucy waited outside with Officer Parker and Mrs. Baker. "Ms. Winters, isn't it?" Chief Thompson asked as he sat across from her. "I believe we met at the town council meeting last month." Elizabeth nodded, surprised he remembered her. "Yes, that's right. Let me start by saying that I appreciate citizens who care about their community," he began. His voice was professional, like he was speaking at an official meeting. "But I'm troubled by what happened today." Elizabeth looked down at her hands. "If I had known she was your daughter—" "That's exactly the problem," Chief Thompson said, leaning forward slightly. "Lucy shouldn't have to be the police chief's daughter to be treated with respect and fairness." Elizabeth felt a lump in her throat as the truth of his words sank in. Outside the room, through the small window in the door, she could see Lucy, talking with Officer Parker. The girl was smiling now as she showed him her science notebook. Part 4. Chief Thompson looked directly at Elizabeth, his eyes showing not anger but disappointment. "My daughter has been coming to this library since she was 5 years old," he said. "She's in the advanced science program at her school. She loves learning more than anything else. The librarians all know her by name." Elizabeth nodded slowly, feeling smaller by the minute. "I didn't know any of that." "Of course you didn't," Chief Thompson replied, "because you didn't ask. You saw a young girl who didn't look like she belonged here in your opinion, and you jumped to conclusions." Elizabeth opened her mouth to defend herself, but then closed it again. There was nothing she could say that would make this better. "Let me ask you something," Chief Thompson continued, his voice gentle but firm. "Would your reaction have been different if Lucy looked different? Or if you had known she was my daughter from the start?" Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears as she realized the truth. She probably wouldn't have questioned a different-looking child. She definitely wouldn't have called the police on the police chief's daughter if she had known. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. Chief Thompson nodded. "I believe you are, and that's a start." He took a deep breath before continuing. "The hardest conversations are often the most necessary ones. I became a police officer to protect and serve everyone in this community, not just some people. As a father, I've had to teach Lucy about unfair treatment much earlier than any child should learn about it." Elizabeth wiped away a tear. She had never thought about what it might be like to raise a child who would face judgment based on appearance. "I didn't mean to hurt her," Elizabeth said softly. "I know," Chief Thompson replied. "But impact matters, more than intention." Lucy was humiliated today in a place where she has always felt safe. Through the window, Elizabeth could see Lucy showing her science notebook to Mrs. Baker and Officer Parker. Despite what had happened, the girl was smiling again, her natural enthusiasm returning. "She seems like a remarkable young lady," Elizabeth said. "She is," Chief Thompson agreed, a hint of pride warming his voice. "She wants to be a scientist, someday. Maybe even work for NASA." They sat in silence for a moment before Chief Thompson spoke again. "Ms. Winters, I believe people can learn and grow from their mistakes. What matters is what we do next." Elizabeth looked up, surprised. She had expected anger, maybe even some kind of punishment. She hadn't expected this conversation to turn toward the future. "What do you think we should do next?" she asked. Chief Thompson smiled slightly. "Well, our community center is starting a new mentorship program. We need volunteers who care about making this town better. People who want to build bridges, rather, than walls. I'd like that, Elizabeth said quietly. I'd like to help. As they stood to leave the conference room, Chief Thompson held out his hand. Elizabeth shook it, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She had made a terrible mistake today, but maybe, just maybe, something good could come from it.